might be surprised to learn how many people actually have used a personal loan before, because it is a lot of people. There's a lot of money out there in personal loans. $232 billion.
So that's a lot of money out there. But when I look at this, what I think is crazy is how fast it's grown in the last 2 years. Can you tell us a little about why that might be? I mean, do you have an opinion?
We're back to where that curve should have been if the pandemic didn't ever happen. So is that growing because of natural population growth? There's some of that, but there's also the reality that I think more and more people are using personal loans today than they ever have before.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot into that. People are using personal loans in lieu of other things that they used to use before. I won't say they're using credit cards less, but they are using it to pay down credit cards. They're using it instead of credit cards in a way. But there's another lending process that's out there, which is home equity loans, that's really collapsing, or has in the last 10 years. And I think people are finding that it's easier to get a personal loan than do a home equity loan. And so you see that money actually moving places, even though home equity loans or home equity lines of credit often have lower rates than a personal loan.
So this is a lot of money out there, but let's talk about how many people actually have personal loans. 22.4 million Americans currently have a personal loan. To put that into perspective, it's a little less than 9% of the population, which means that if you went out and grabbed 11 people, just randomly, one of them will currently have a personal loan.
That's a lot. Now, that's not nearly as much as, say, credit cards, which is what, about 75 or 80% of people. But still, for something that's grown so fast in the last 10 years, that's definitely a lot of people that's changed over the short time.
So here's a mind-blowing statistic that shows kind of the dichotomy of what's going on in the country right now. This is almost exactly the same number of millionaires in the United States right now.
Now that is an interesting statistic. I would not have believed that 1 in 11 people was also a millionaire.
So on one side of the bag, on one side of the curve, you've got 22 million people who take out a personal loan. On the other side, you've got 22 million millionaires in the country right now. Now, most of us may be in the middle, but sometimes you might need a personal loan.
I'm going to throw you a curveball. I think part of the growth is driven by the fact that more people are aware that personal loans exist, and also they're using this more and more to consolidate their debt as they let credit card debts get away from them.
Yeah.
No question, debt consolidation is a big issue. What is really interesting, and this is not probably the time or place to get into it, but the whole idea of personal loans, payday loans, alternative lending really started to explode in the 1990s. And this is a generational trend in terms of financial services. And it's been growing much more significantly in the last little bit. And it may be partly because, it's harder for average Americans to get by. Unexpected expenses and emergencies pop up that disrupt them in a way that they didn't, their parents' generation didn't disrupt them. And I think there's some of that as well.
I think it's interesting you mentioned, payday loans and alternative loans and things of that nature. And it's interesting because we said 22.4 million people have personal loans, but this is based on credit bureau data. And so it doesn't count any of the loans that aren't reported to the credit bureau, which is pretty much every payday loan. Also, pawn loans, they're not going to be reported. So there's probably another couple of million minimum out there who aren't even reported.
Yeah, payday loans are a really interesting one because they're such a short-term loan. Our studies in the past suggested about 6% of the population have had a payday loan in the last 365 days. So it's probably only 2 or 3% that have one right now, but Over the course of a year, it's probably 6%, and this is 8% have personal loans. So you start to understand a little bit of the breadth and scope of lending and borrowing in the country.
All right. Well, let's move on from the count. That how big are these personal loans? I mean, I know they can be small, $1,000, $2,000, but they can also be $100,000. SoFi offers loans, for example, $100,000 for personal loans.
Which is probably exactly why this average is not terribly meaningful to people, because the number of people that have $11,000, an $11,000 personal loan is probably not that much, right? To your point, there's a bunch of people with $2,000 to $5,000 loans. And then there are people that skew on the far other side that have, $100,000 loans.
Yeah. Yeah. This is definitely a left skewed distribution. So the majority of people are going to be far less than $10,000, but those really large numbers really make this average really a lot larger than it is. And the other thing about this is that's the loan balance. That's not the loan amount that they started with. So some of these people have been paying on their loans for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So it's much smaller than it originally was.